إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولله الحمد. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. صلاة العشاء. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. ذلك الله ربي. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ورب أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته يقوى ويقول. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سمع الله لمن حمد. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إنه ليس لي علم بموضع رزقي وإنما أطلبه بخطرات تخطر على قلبي وعجول في طلبه البلدان فأنا فيما لا طالب كالحيران لا أدري في سهل هو أم في جبل أم في أرض أم في سماء أم في بر أم في بحر وعلى يدي من ومن قبل من وقد علمت أن علمه عندك وأسبابه بيدك وأنت الذي تقسمه بلطفك وتسببه برحمتك اللهم صل على محمد وآله واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا ومأخذه قريبا ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك وصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله قدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا. يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله.
يا أبا الحسن يا ولي ابن محمد أيها الهادي النقي ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. أخري حاجاتكم الله سبحانه. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليه وأجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد. الرحمن الرحيم. الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد صلى على محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. set of words of dua in which Imam Masum says, Allahumma zayyini fihi bis-satri wal-'afaf wasturni fihi bi-libas al-qunu'i wal-kafaf wahmilni fihi 'ala al-'adli wal-insaf wa aminni fihi min kulli ma akhaf bi'ismatika ya ismat al-khaifin. Imam says, "O Allah, on this day, please adorn me with covering and chastity, and cover me on it with the dress of satisfaction and contentment, and encourage me on this day to be just and impartial, and secure me against whatever I fear out of your protection, O the shelter of those who are fearful." When you look at this dua, one of the few messages that we can derive from this beautiful word of Imam Masum is that, number one, beautification or beautifying oneself with the chastity and modesty that is being mentioned. That's the first thing that Imam asks for, is that Allah adorn me with what? With beautiful clothing, with something which is expensive, khulla from heavens or whatnot. No, with bisatre wal afaf, libas al qunu'e wal kafaf, beautifying oneself with chastity and modesty. Number two, adapting to the lifestyle of contentment and austerity. Kifayat shi'ari, jisko hum Urdu mein kehte hain. We adapt to various different lifestyles. When you travel, when you go for ziyarat, you're there for 10 days, 12 days, 2 weeks. You go to Hajj, you're there for 15 days. Those 15 days, you adapt to that lifestyle that you have to go through, the difficulties that you have to. And what better example than the 2 years of Corona that we have adapted. So some of us have adapted well, some of us are still struggling with it. But overall, we learn to adapt as we move along and we see things unfold in front of us. But one thing that we know for sure, as far as the attributes of muttaqin is concerned, that's something which will be there on permanent basis. This Corona, of course, will end eventually. Other illnesses, other things and events that happened, they come and go. You're not going to remain young forever. You're going to get eventually older, go through the difficulties of life, ups and downs of life. All those things will happen. As you get into that particular phase of your life, you'll adapt to it. But that permanent feature that we should all adapt to, which Imam is asking here in the dua, he says, "Oh Allah, give me the ability to adapt to the lifestyle of contentment and austerity." That is going to be forever. That's not something which is for time being. That is not something which, this will come in handy throughout your life. Even when you are fluent, even when you're going through a difficult patch in your life. As long as the concept of contentment and austerity is with you, you will find it to be something useful. Number three, Imam says establishing justice and being impartial. And number four, living in immunity. Of course, very quickly in the next 3 or 4 minutes, I'll go through the explanation of these words. Chastity and modesty, iffat or pagdamini or ifaf, as being mentioned in this, are two very important accolades of mu'mineen, which means preventing any illicit desires or any lustful desires. Quran in Surah Nur, verse 33 also says the following: those who cannot afford marriage. So there's a concept of marriage. Islam knew that there will be a affordability issue when it comes to marriage. There are expenses, there are charges, there are things that are associated with it, which will come along. So those who cannot afford marriage should maintain chastity until Allah enriches them out of His grace. So in order to get married, of course, a lot of time we think that you need too much. And if the concept of contentment was established, then of course, even with little means and whatever bare minimum means that you have, you'll be able to get married. But the problem lies when we start thinking that no, we have to invite all the community members, all the family members, and I have to go above and beyond my status to get this out of the way. This is my daughter's wedding. This is my only son's wedding. And I'm going to go ahead and show everyone. And, you know, people are expecting, families expecting, the relatives are expecting, all these expectations of the people. So I'm going to go ahead and do whatever it takes to give them a good party. Well, with that, you're going to be breaking a lot of rules, and therefore it's not worth it. Quran says those who cannot afford marriage should maintain chastity until Allah enriches them out of His grace. So carnal desires are not supposed to be suppressed. They are there for a purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created that for a purpose. Therefore, it should be dealt with properly, either by getting married, whether it's temporary or permanent, or by showing restraint or restraining oneself until they get married. How to restrain? So, well, that's the most difficult question. How can one restrain from these, illicit desires that come into our minds and creep into our, little minds? And what do we do with it? How do we deal with this thing? Now, one of the best ways of dealing with these is fasting. Fasting, and not just in the month of Ramadan, as you see how it keeps us from many ill thoughts. If you were to do that outside of month of Ramadan, this would be one of the ways of controlling these desires. Also in Surah Nur, there's a discussion regarding how a person can go ahead and keep himself or herself from getting into, falling victim or becoming a victim to some of these illicit desires, and the solution to that. So this is where the concept of haya comes into play. That concept of modesty that is being mentioned over here. That if a heart lacks modesty and chastity, you hear this a lot. Someone might do something and say, well, they must have, they're good people though. He's a good person. Ended up burning down a place. No, but he's a good person by heart. Or ended up doing something, or has never prayed in their life. No, but he's a good person, very good person. He's never done anything, which is obligatory upon them, but you find people go ahead and justify, no, that person is a very good person. And his heart, he doesn't really mean anything bad from his heart. The apparent action might be evil. But it doesn't really mean anything from his heart. So it says, if the heart lacks modesty and chastity, it will not be subject to God's attention. But the moment there's modesty in it and chastity is in it, it'll be morid tawajjuh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, a vessel which is dirty from inside, no matter how pure of a drink you pour in it, it is going to go ahead and corrupt it. Similar is the vessel, this body of ours, that no matter how beautification we do and apply to it from the outside, as long as the internal is polluted, it's going to remain that way. There was a story of a thief with principles. I'll conclude it with these couple of stories. A man once found a bag of jewels with a piece of paper with Ayatul Kursi in it. So this man he was a thief, professional thief. And he found there was that bag of jewel that he has stolen. There was a piece of paper in it which had Ayatul Kursi written in it. This man looked at Ayatul Kursi, and then he decided to find the owner and return it. His friends were surprised. He said, what's wrong with you? You steal things all the time. Why are you going to go ahead and return this? He said, the owner of these jewels had a belief that Ayatul Kursi will protect his wealth. I've stolen it. That person has a belief that Ayatul Kursi will protect his wealth. And I stole it. If I don't return this, it might shake in his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in Ayatul Kursi, for example. So then I would have stolen his wealth, and as well as I would have stolen his religion and his deen. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and return this. In Manaqib ibn Maghazali, a blind man came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Bibi Fatima was sitting with Rasulullah. She got up, put on her hijab. Rasulullah said to her that he cannot see you, he's blind. She replied, but I can see him. And he still has other senses which are intact. He can hear my voice. he can smell my fragrance, and all of those things are still intact. So she goes ahead and she, goes inside the house. Rasulullah replied, Ashhadu annaki bad'atun minni. I bear witness that you are definitely part of me. And there are many such riwayat or stories like this that we find to be where a person from inside, this chastity, this modesty has to exist inside. There's a man, he was an Arabi, a Bedouin. He came with ill intentions towards Rasulullah. And with disrespect, he said, Ya Muhammad. Quran clearly says, don't call Prophet with his name. Say, Ya Muhammad. Whoever called Prophet Ya Muhammad, Rasulullah would respond in the same way, Ya Muhammad. That's why if you go to some of these Arab countries, especially Saudi Arabia, if they don't know, strangers, they don't know your name, they'll call you Muhammad. Ya Muhammad, they'll call you that. Because they don't know your name, they'll just call you Muhammad. That's a common way of addressing someone. And then, so this man addressed Rasulullah with Ya Muhammad. Rasulullah responded back, Ya Muhammad. But if someone said, Ya Rasulullah, Rasulullah would say, Labbaik wa sa'adaik. And he would, embrace him. This man insultingly said to him, Anta sahir al-kadhab alladhi ma adallat al-khadra wa la aqallat al-ghabra. You are a magician, you're, a liar, and the sky has not shared nor earth since the weight of someone more min dhi lahjatin huwa akdhabu min. Liar than you. No one's a bigger liar than you. This is how he's speaking to Rasulullah. Of course, companions are sitting. Today, we all have this story of this man who was burned to death in Pakistan, this Sri Lankan man. Of course, he was a Buddhist. He worked in a factory, and someone alleged saying that he disrespected Rasulullah, Gustaki Rasul. Nobody knows, nobody has the proofs of it. Nobody heard that. Someone said it, someone heard it, whatever the case may have been. Even if that was true, still, this is not how to deal with it. So we condemn this whole process. But nonetheless, they called upon people, the mob gathers, drags this man out of the factory and beats him to death and then burns his body. Well, where do you see this sort of practice in Islam? It does not exist. Similarly, this person, that man, that Arabi, is insulting Rasulullah right in front of his face. This person, if let's say this allegedly is being addressed that this Sri Lankan man, disrespected Rasulullah. Even then, it has to be proven. And punishment has to be given by the court, not you. So totally wrong way of dealing with this situation. First of all, I doubt that he had said anything. Secondly, the way mob dealt with it. Anyways, this person in the history is sitting in front of Rasulullah, insulted him on his face. Who gets up? Umar al-Khattab heard this, got up, and wanted to hit this man before Prophet stopped him. So this is in the books of history. This Bedouin came, insulted Rasulullah. Well, you and I would be the same way. I'm just, the second Khalifa is there. He was aggressive, so the riwayat mentions him. But if you and I were there, we would be the same way. If someone insults my father, your dad, your father, your mother, you will take it seriously. You will try and respond. So this man was insulting Rasulullah. Umar al-Khattab, he stood up, and he wanted to hit this man before Rasulullah stopped him, and he said, Ijlis ya Aba Hafs, faqad kana al-halimu an yakuna nabiyya. O father of Hafsa, sit down. The Prophet then said, faqad kana al-halimu an yakuna nabiyya. Forbearance is one of the features of a Nabi. You cannot be a Nabi unless you are forbearing and you have sabr and patience. And so Rasulullah then offered this man to embrace Islam. He refused and took out a lizard and said that I brought a lizard and I'm going to go ahead and, make him sting you. Said if the lizard brought Iman, I would too. And of course, one of the miracles that were produced by Rasulullah over there is that even, of course, animals were also, bearing Iman, and even the jinns, on many occasions, we've seen that they have brought Iman. So, but nonetheless, Rasulullah, how he dealt with this man? He dealt with him with patience and with forbearance. And that's the moral of the story, that, of course, while we are looking for the external purity and external beautification, what's more needed is the internal purity and internal beautification. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and ability to understand the concept of modesty and chastity, and hopefully we can adopt this concept as well. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum Rasulullah, assalamu alaikum Nabi Allah, assalamu alaikum Habib Allah, assalamu alaikum Aqiratullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, assalamu alaikum Abu Abdullah, assalamu alaikum Rasulullah, assalamu alaikum wa rajattika wa abika wa ala ummika wa akhika wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum Gharib al-Quraba, assalamu alaikum Mu'in al-Du'afa wal-Fuqara, assalamu alaikum Shams al-Shamus wa Anis al-Nufus ayyul madfun ba'datus Ali ibn Musa wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. Assalamu alaikum Imam al-Insa wal-Jannah, assalamu alaikum Sharik al-Quran ajjalallahu ta'ala farajak wa sahhalallahu مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أوانك وصورك ورحمة الله وبركاته.